just so exactly what I needed to be walking into this sanctuary and seeing this community gather together. It's so cold out, and it's so warm in here. It's also warm in here, so we're working on temperature control overall. But of course, it is just such a joy to be here on this week when we're celebrating Tu B'Shvat, when we're celebrating this moment of potential and growth, to be in Jewish time, in Jewish community together.
And as we settle into this Shabbat, we also want to acknowledge the difficulties of this time. And it is impossible to find the words to express the pain, disgust, the outrage, the overwhelm that each unfolding day has brought since January 20th, less than a month ago. And as Rabbi Cari has said, that's why it matters even more that we are here together as another week ends. And we just want to send extra love and care to those who work for the federal government, who are transgender, who have transgender loved ones, those who are on the front lines of immigration, science, health, education, and to any and all of us who may feel that their mental or physical health is threatened. So, as we have done every week, we say very strongly that we will not let anyone take our joy, our compassion, our rootedness in the values of loving kindness away from us, the spirit of generosity. And we urge you to find the meaningful ways for you to resist, to work towards a world we want to live in, but equally so, to double down on your own self-care, to be with friends, to laugh, read, learn, dance, to engage with life with all of your energy, create art, do what you need to do to care for yourself, for your soul. And how lucky we are tonight to have Rachel Kanar here, the executive director from Nature Israel, here with us, who will present as we did last Shabbat. We'll go all the way through to Mourner's Kaddish, to the end of Mourner's Kaddish, and then we'll invite Rachel up to for her presentation, which I was lucky to see on Wednesday with the sixth graders and with Hebrew High. And for me, Rachel, it was a reminder of the extraordinary beauty of the land of Israel, and even more so, it was a great reminder of how nature heals, how it knows no boundaries or separations that we humans seem to insist upon creating. So it is a gift to have you here. The poet Rosemary Watola Traumer wrote a poem just a couple of days ago. It's called Even in a Time of Intolerance. And she begins with a quote from Joy Harjo, the 23rd US Poet Laureate, who wrote, "We all have a part in shifting the story." And she writes, "There is, in an overfull classroom, a woman teaching not only history, but compassion. There's a barista making hearts in the foam of every cappuccino she serves. There's a man helping another man on crutches as he struggles to cross the icy street. There's a library room full of women chanting about praying for their enemy. There are students raising money to help those with breast cancer and AIDS. 2 girls are laughing for the joy of laughing till their faces are tear-streaked and their ribs and bellies are sore. There's a poet who pours courage and music into every word she shares with the world. And another woman hears those words and thinks, me, that poet is talking to me. This is how we change the world. One kind act, one true word, one long laugh at a time. Because now that woman is ablaze with wondering, what is my part in shifting the story?" And so we would like to invite up to light our Shabbat candles. First, Denise Aronson, who is here tonight, we'll hear more about it, to celebrate a shift in her own life, a celebratory shift. And we'd like to invite Steve McHugh up, who has come back from, was it a month-long time in Mexico? And definitely, yeah. And a big welcome back to you, Steve. And also the Canar family. We'd love for you to come up and light the candles as well. We need as much light as we can these days. We have 3 Shabbat candlesticks, and Rabbi Cari will show you how we do it here. And if you're looking for the words, it's at the top of page 1.
Exactly. 2.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlek ner shel Shabbat. Shabbat shalom. And Denise will invite you to stay right up.
Yeah, I just want to take a minute to say that I'm going to lead the Shekianu because it's a prayer of refresh, restart, thinking about things that are new, different, giving yourself a moment to pause. And for me, it's about selling my business today after 32 years. And so I'm retired, I think, as of right now. So it's much nicer to have intention and the power of that prayer and the power of what I'm feeling today. It's much nicer to do in community than alone. So I invite you to think of your own Shekianu of what's important to you today.
And you'll find that on page 1 at the bottom of the page. Just want to say also that Denise has taken this moment also to sponsor our own egg tonight in celebration, and we wish you so well on this next chapter of your life. Look forward to sharing it with you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
Sharing with us in this moment.
We continue with the words, when change comes, new beginnings and fresh starts don't need midnight to prevail. A renewed shift blossoms when you decide to exhale.
We turn to page 11, the words of Lecha Dodi. Invitation to Shabbat, to come into our sanctuary, into our hearts, into our souls. We'll sing stanzas 1, 2, 5, and 9. When we reach stanza 9, I'll gesture with my hands. It's an invitation to rise in body or spirit, to turn your attention to the back of the sanctuary, to invite Shabbat in fully, as well as greet those members of our community who are joining us on Zoom.
And we welcome you to take that exhale if you feel like you've been holding your breath this week. And you'll notice tonight Dan has put in some extra nature to honor Tu B'Shvat. Watch the beauty flow on by us. Lechan Dodi Likrat Kala Yalala Yalala Yalla Pinei Shabbat Nekavela Yaila Elai Lechan Dodi Likrat Kala Yalala Yalala Yalla Pinei Shabbat Nekavela O Shamor V'Zachor B'Dibur Echad Hishni Anu El HaMeyuchad Adonai Echad U'Shemo Echad L'Shemo L'Tiferet V'Litila Lechan Dodi Likra Kala Yalala Yalala Yalla Pinei Shabbat Nekavela Yaila Elai Lechan Dodi Likra Kala Yalala Yalala Yalla Pinei Shabbat Nekavela Oh Likrat Shabbat Lechu v'nelcha Ki hi mikor habaracha Merosh mikedem nisucha Sof ma'aseh v'machshav achila Lechan Dodi Likra Kala Yalala Yalala Yalla Pinei Shabbat Nekavela Yaila Elai Lechan Dodi Likra Kala Yalala Yalala Yalla Pinei Shabbat Nekavela Oh Hitoreri Hitoreri Kiva Ore Kumi Ori 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 Shir Daberi Kevod Adonai Alayich Nigla Lecha Dodi Likra Kala Yalala Yalala Yalla Pinei Shabbat Nekavela Yaila Elai Lecha Dodi Likra Kala Yalala Yalala Yalla Pinei Shabbat Nekavela Oh Bo'i V'Shalom Ateret Bala Gam B'Simcha U'V'Tzola Toch Emuneh Am Segula Bo'i Kala Bo'i Kala Lecha Dodi Likra Kala Yalala Yalala Yalla Pinei Shabbat Nekavela Yaila Elai Lechan Dodi Likra Kala Yalala Yalala Yalla Pinei Shabbat Nekavela
Every tree, every growing thing as it grows says this truth. You harvest what you sow. With life as short as a half-taken breath, don't plant anything but love. Everything you see has its roots in the unseen world. The forms may change, yet the essence remains the same. Every wonderful sight will vanish. Every sweet word will fade. But do not be disheartened. The source they come from is eternal, growing. Why do you weep? The source is within you, and this whole world is springing up from it. The source is full. Its waters are ever flowing. Drink your fill. By Rumi.
Turn to page 16 in that far right column, in the bold print right in the middle. Finding our ground, feeling that strength underneath us, that support. Finding our breath. Finding our light. Baruch Hu, dear one, Shekhinah, holy name. When I call on the light of my soul, I come home. Baruch Hu, dear one, Shekhinah, holy name. When I call on the light of my soul, I come home. Baruch Hu, dear one, Shekhinah, holy name. When I call on the light of my soul, I come home. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. Baruch ata Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed.
You may be seated.
Turn to the words of Ve'ahavta, this newish setting that we've been learning together. All your heart, all your soul, and you shall love. All your heart, all your soul, לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך. All your heart, all your soul, and you shall love, and you shall love. All your soul, all you are, and you shall love, and you shall love. All right, we can do this as a round. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך. I switch your part. All your heart, all your soul, and you shall love, and you shall love. All your heart, all you are, and you shall love, and you shall love. All right, one more time. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך. All your heart, all your soul, and you shall love, and you shall love. All your soul, all you are, and you shall love, and you shall love.
Loneliness. I too have known loneliness. I too have known what it is to feel misunderstood, rejected, and suddenly not beautiful, not at all beautiful. Oh, Mother Earth, your comfort is great, your arms never withhold. It has saved my life to know this. Your rivers flowing, your roses opening in the morning, oh motions of tenderness. Turn to the words at the bottom of page 21, Mi Chamocha. La
ya la 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 la, ya la ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la ya la la la, ya la 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 la.
Turn to page 25. Rising in body or in spirit for the Amidah.
Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei HaKol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot V'imahot, U'mevii Geula Livnei V'neihem, Le'man Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechaye HaKol Atah Rav Le'Hoshia, Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechaye HaKol Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Verofeh Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Baal Gevurot, Umido Melach, Melech Memit Umechayem, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atal hachayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechaye hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, Ukedoshim b'chol yom yahallelu chasela. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh.
and from oppression to redemption, now, swiftly, and soon. Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim matir asurim Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim matir asurim Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim matir asurim Turn to our Misha Berach on page 130, sending out healing energy to all who are in need, in body, spirit, mind. Begin with those who are on our communal Misha Berach list, and then we'll open it up to anybody who would like to add a loved one. We're praying for the healing of Robin Cassell, who broke her leg and her ankle falling on the ice. Praying for the healing of Nan Owens, who broke her toe. For Sandy Waxman, Dan Fine, for Liliana Walheim Martinez, for Caroline Lever and Sherry Lever, who are not feeling well, for Beth Ann Colapi, who also has the flu, and for her husband, Bill Lavoie. Pray for healing for Fred Rosenberg, Max Weisenfeld, Sharon Sabarsky, Mark Zauderer, Lynn Bishop, Art Cohen, Mindy Bates, Harriet Snyder, Ann Cobble, Marilyn Clace, Ed Snow, Stanley Roth, Aaron Wasserman, Ayelet Galba, Chava Hirschnoel, Evan Lenz, Tori Macia, Amaria Roberts, Stephen Tesney, Kyle Warren, Sarah Kianowski, Grant Taylor, Steve Taven, Dave Carbonneau, Ken Doucette, Debbie Gilman, Neil Daniels Midman, Frank Andy Joyce, Marcia M., Laura Bell, Jenny Vanderpool, Annie Graham and her family, Anya Cobble, and Sue Boardman. And if there are names you would like to add, for those of you joining us online, please put your names in the chat. We'll start over here. Naomi.
My brother, Ellie Potash.
Hi.
My brother Stevenson.
Andrew.
Scott Becker, Ed Coleman.
Denver Money.
Steve.
My neighbor, Cheryl Emerson.
loved ones named, all we are praying for and thinking about. Let us join our voices together. Mi sheberach Avoteinu Avraham Yitzchak veYaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel veLeah, Hu yivarech v'yirapeh et hacholim. Ela Rifana, Ela Rifana la, Ela Rifana, Ela Rifana, Mi sheberach Avoteinu Avraham Yitzchak veYaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel veLeah, Hu yivarech v'yirapeh et hacholim.
Turn to page 44. Turning our hearts to those whose life and legacy are a blessing to us. This moment of memory held in community reminds us that while no one has our experiences of loss, our exact experiences of loss, it does not mean we must be alone in our times of need and loss. There are voices, ears listening, hearts open to you. And so we'll say the names of those who are on our Mourners Kaddish list first. If you are joining us online and remembering someone, please add their name using the chat. And then there'll be an opportunity for those of us here in the sanctuary to say the names of our loved ones we are thinking of.
And this week we are remembering Marilyn Walheim Magnet, beloved mother of Deborah Walheim, grandmother of Liliana and Sophia Walheim Martinez. The Yortzites tonight include Corinne Cohen, Marcy Terrio's mother, and Bruce Abramson, Marcy's brother. We are also remembering Daniel Seltzer, Gal Breslow's nephew. And it is the Yortzeit of Kira Komen, beloved daughter of Stu and Kathy Komen. And we know, Stu, that you're joining us online, and we're so glad you're with us. In this year of memory, we remember Eileen Kleinkopf, Kathy Nath, Pat Urich, and Sivan Ehrlich. And if there are Yortzites you're observing or loved ones who are feeling especially close, please raise your hand. We'll start over here, Lynn.
My grandmother, Francisca Abilene, was born on this day in 1900.
Wow, thank you, Kat.
My mom, dad, Amsterdam.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah.
For those named, for those who have no one to say their names for them, we become one community of memory connected through these sacred words and the sacred act of remembering. I invite you to rise in body or spirit. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divrach irte v'yamlich malchute, b'chayecho u'v'yomechon, u'v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mivarach, le'olam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudesha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Da'amiram be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. V'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. V'imru amen. Zichronam livracha. May their memories be an abiding blessing, to which we say, amen. You may be seated.
And Rachel, it is an honor to ask you to come forward. I think this middle mic is going to be the best one here.
And I hope you saw our announcements about who Rachel is, but just in case not, first I'll give you the informal and then I'll give you the formal introduction. So I was gardening in my front garden, and this person walked by with this awesome water bottle that said Nature Israel. And I said, ooh, that's cool. Where'd you get that? Because apparently that's what I do. I just hopped out of the garden and talked to people carrying cool water bottles. And it was Rachel who had recently moved into the same neighborhood that I had recently moved into in Arlington. And she said, actually this amazing organization that does all of this incredible work in Israel, preserving the environment, and it's the oldest not-for-profit in Israel, and she told me all these wonderful things about it. And I thought, oh, we need to hear from you. And so tonight, in honor of Tu B'Shvat, which just passed, and in deep gratitude to you and all the work you and your organization do, it's an honor to be learning from you.
To be learning with you.
With
Thank
you.
you so much, Carrie. Yes. I have to say that, the middle mic. I have to say that being new to Arlington and it being after October 7th, I don't take that water bottle everywhere I go, and there are some places that I intentionally don't take it. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I need my water bottle, and then I'm like, oh, I have to get another one because now I don't want to take this water bottle around that says Israel on it all the time. So it was pretty cool to find a neighbor that was like, cool water bottle. So that's just a shout out to Carrie, and that made me feel very happy and welcomed into our new neighborhood. And what I'll say, just I really want to say a very little bit about myself, but I just want to put it in context that I'm here with my family, my husband Chagai and my daughter Ella, and we moved to the Boston area from Israel, where I had been living for just over 13 years. I'd lived in Israel a few other times. There was a lot of back and forth. But in this specific iteration where I flew with a one-way ticket and, you know, got an Israeli passport and lived and worked in Israel and got married and had a baby, was 13 years. And during that time, I did a bunch of different work I won't talk about now, but just to say, I did learn about the organization that I'm going to tell you about tonight when I was there. It is the first nonprofit in Israel. In Hebrew, it's called Chevra Lahaganat Hateva. Is there anyone that's ever heard the name of that organization in this room? Do you have family in Israel, or have you lived in Israel? Are you Israeli? Okay. So that name of that organization translated into English is the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel. Is there anyone that's heard that name of that organization, or the acronym SPNI? Anyone? Bueller. So this is the reason that I'm going around and giving these talks, besides that it's fascinating, because it's very interesting that the first nonprofit in Israel one of possibly the biggest, or definitely in the three biggest organizations in Israel, one that is the most beloved by Israelis, the one that is a part of the social fabric of Israel and has shaped the culture of Israel, is not known by Americans. And so I got this job to run the American Friends of, which we call Nature Israel, right? I don't actually work for SPNI. SPNI is a massive organization in Israel with like 500 employees and 1,000 volunteers that is about 72 years old now. I work for the American Supporting Organization. I'm the head of Nature Israel. We're a very small organization, although growing. And our goal is to support this organization that I'm going to tell you about tonight and to educate the American public about nature in Israel. I think that doing it on Tu B'Shvat, it's really funny because I get booked for Tu B'Shvat. This is my, sorry if you saw me yawning, this is my fourth or fifth presentation this week, because people are like, oh, it's Tu B'Shvat, get that nature lady. And of course, we know that we can love and appreciate and learn about the environment and care about it every day of the year. But I will tell you why it's really appropriate to talk about it on Tu B'Shvat. So we created some materials for Tu B'Shvat, and I was learning more about Tu B'Shvat that I didn't know before, that it was created during the rabbinic period, specifically very soon after Jews were forced out of the land of Israel by the Romans, because they realized, and we can feel this very clearly, that, you know, when you look out the window on Tu B'Shvat, do you feel, or it wasn't before they invented Tu B'Shvat, but the point is that our experience of the seasons here, or in Poland, or in wherever, you know, people were, is very different than the seasons in Israel. And so they created this holiday of Tu B'Shvat, the New Year for the trees, specifically to remind the Jewish people of the seasons and the nature in Israel. So that's what we're going to learn about tonight. So if we, let me see, what else do I need to tell you before we start the slideshow? Yeah, let's just go to the first slide. One of I'm going to tell you about the organization and a few other things. We are protecting the environment locally in Israel. We're also have innovations that we share globally, and a lot of what we do is good for Israel and good for the world. Next slide. So what I'm going to tell you about first, before I tell you about all of the primary work and the core work of the environmental work of the organization, is something really extraordinary that happened. And thank you so much for this space that you created to talk about hostages, and that means a lot to me as an Israeli, and I know that we're all affected. But so it's very interesting. The Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel has 11 field schools throughout the country that will come up later in the slideshow. So during October 7th, what happened when people were fleeing, we know that there are some people that the government put up in hotels that had to flee the survivors from the kibbutzim that were within 4 kilometers of the Gaza border. But the attack went in 24 kilometers in. So people that live in towns like Sderot or Ofakim or Holit were not, had nowhere to go, and they ran to the field schools. We took in hundreds of families and provided them not just wartime housing and food, but did what we do with all kids and families at the field schools and in the school system, is we did these environmental programs with them. We took them on nature walks, and we noticed that the people staying at the field schools, although those are very rustic accommodations, they're always like, don't tell the Americans about the field schools, because if they come, they will not like it. But we're doing so much better, ironically, than the people staying in the luxury hotels. Why is that? We started thinking about it. The engagement with nature was profoundly helping people. And then, of course, we know, and this was during COVID, there was a great number of studies that showed that this exposure to nature, even just hearing bird song, definitely seeing those beautiful bird photos thank you very much, Dan, in the slideshow, can affect our actual psychological state, our emotional well-being in measurable scientific ways. And it was from this that the Nature Heals program was born. We started providing these programs for everyone in the hotels, for all of the families that had been evacuated from northern Israel. The program is big, and it serves families and people of all ages. A special program was created for teens who've been locked in hotel rooms with their whole family, not seeing any of their friends or anyone else they know. Kids are catatonic. There's a terrible problem with drugs and alcohol abuse from kids who were not youth at risk that all of a sudden are at risk, and everyone is living with this deep trauma. And we take the kids on 3 or 4 day, very intensive wilderness journeys. They're now called resilience journeys. This is a photo of kids from one of those journeys. They don't have their cell phones, they don't have screens, and it starts really hard. And by the end, they're themselves again. They smile, they talk to one another. We had an external evaluation implemented at the get-go because we knew it was very important and we were gonna have to raise money for it. And what we found is that 98% of the youth that participate in this program say that they have diminished anxiety, stress, and depression after the program. And the parents we interview tell us that it's lasting. So that doesn't mean people won't need therapy, and we're not against, but it's a massive problem in Israel right now, trauma, that 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 people are dealing with trauma. And so the idea that we can provide, we've already served more than 100,000 people. So this kind of programming is actually low cost, it's not pharmacological, and it reminds us of how we are a part of nature, and that when we're in nature, we feel more whole and we're reminded of our place in divinity. So that's just a bit on that, but we can keep going now to the next slide. I'm going to just tell you more about the organization. Dan, okay, so why is Israel so important in any case? Why is Israel important? Why does it matter environmentally? One reason is that it's a global biodiversity hotspot. Only 3% of the Earth's surface is considered a global biodiversity hotspot, including Israel. And the rich biodiversity is, of course, endangered by unsustainable development and climate change. And these are issues that the Society for the Protection of Nature is addressing. But you can see that at the intersection of 3 continents, Africa, Asia, and Europe, that there are animal species that are interacting there. It just makes it a really special place for all life. Next slide. Another really major unusual thing that I didn't even know, even after living there for 15 years, is that, and I was always a cat person, by the way, and this organization is really a bird organization. So there was a really interesting conversation that I had with the CEO when I first met him. But anyway, we're making peace even between cats and birds. So it turns out that Israel is the second largest bird migration fly route on the planet. There are these places where it's quite narrow. We know that billions of birds migrate from north to south, except for a few of them that just hang around here, even though it's cold. I don't get that. But a lot of birds migrate. And so all of the birds in Northern Europe fly to the south of Africa and then back every year. But in that migration, there are only a couple of places that they can stop and rest. The Gibraltar on the far west side, or Israel, because it's more than 1,000, I think it's 1,100 miles that they have to cross between the Mediterranean and all of North Africa. If you look at this map, you can see pretty clearly the area that's that light brown is not a place that has water and food accessible. Also to the east of Israel, not only is it dry, but also there's a lot of hunting. It's very unsafe. So it's really like this gauntlet that hundreds of millions of birds are flying at any one time, and they have a very few places that they can land, and Israel has one of them. And the hula, has anybody here heard of the hula area? Right, so it's very famous, the hula, because That was actually the impetus for the founding of the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel, was founded in 1953 by scientists, ornithologists from the University of Tel Aviv and a group of kibbutzniks who said, you cannot drain the swamps. What were we doing? We were draining the swamps, and what were we doing? It's the quote is, drain the swamps and make the desert bloom, right? So this was not sound environmental practice, but nobody knew that at the time, and they had legitimate concerns. They were trying to deal with malaria, I understand that, and they had this idea that they were going to turn this whole area that they called swamp into agricultural land. So they were going to drain the whole thing, and they were doing it. They went for it, but there were this very committed group of people that formed the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel before Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring. They were like proto-environmentalists because they knew about this bird migration fly route and that it would be an ecological catastrophe, really a disaster. So the hula is very crowded, but you'll find out that we're working on expanding and rewilding Israel's original wetlands. Next slide. So the third reason, so biodiversity hotspot, bird migration flyway. It's also a very dense urban environment, and Israel is one of the most densely packed and biodiverse countries in the world. So the solutions that we come up with there are replicable in other places in the world. There's our favorite city, Tel Aviv. Next slide. Keep going. We do conservation, environmental advocacy, education, ecotourism, and now we add to that ecotherapy. That program is ongoing, and we're going to also talk about rewilding, combating climate change. Next. Conservation. Next. So one of the main core focus there's a lot of different aspects to environmental work, and you'll see that an organization like SPNI does an enormous amount of things, really. It's not possible for me. I'm going to talk real fast at some point. I'm going to just start speeding up. But I'm going to start now by saying that the core of it really always began with open spaces, right? This is who we are at our core. And when you know Israel and how small and how densely populated it is and how committed to developing every inch of it they are, right? Anything that's just an open space is just waste from the Israeli mindset. So the idea that we could preserve these open spaces for all the other species that we share the land with, and to say that this should not be altered, that it should be as creation created it, right? As God intended. And what you can see from this map, these are ecological corridors that SPNI, this is the ecological corridor and open space map that SPNI created so that animals have freedom of movement and safe passage. So we can go to the next slide. That's a jungle cat. We are also very committed to keeping dense cities sustainable and creating urban nature places. This is the Park HaYarkon in Tel Aviv, kind of like a Central Park, kind of a park, really, really big park. And so in the face of rapid urban expansion, we want to make sure that we have green spaces. Next slide. So in urban nature, this is a real photo. This is not AI. I picked this one out because you can see the freeway sign, how close it is. This is the Gazelle Valley. This is an extraordinary achievement of SPNI with the people in the neighborhood. There was a neighborhood in Jerusalem that had this green patch where some gazelles lived, and the city grew up around it, and the gazelles were just there, and all of a sudden they were hemmed in. Right? You have the Malka Mall and the Holy Land Development Project over here and the freeway over here. And of course the developers, by the way, the ones who did the Holy Land, that's the one that Olmert went to jail for, by the way. We're going to do another project here. And the neighborhood came together with the assistance of SPNI and protected the space. It's since been beautifully restored. There's a visitor center, and you can go and visit with gazelles. There's a lot of other stuff that's happening there. They've built an amphibious observation, like where you can go under the pond and see the action under the pond of what's going on in there. It's a beautiful place to visit that I recommend you do when you're in Jerusalem. It's called the Gazelle Valley. Next slide. So this is an interesting point. Because the IDF recognizes the climate change as a national threat, they have formed something called the Nature Defense Forces program within the IDF. And that they do things like save birds and wildlife, clean up oil spills, beach cleanups, and other kinds of major environmental cleanup and work. Next slide. Protecting birds is such a big part of what we do. You can go to the next slide. We support the migration flyway, which I told you about at the intersection of the 3 continents. That's another view of the hula. If anybody ever has a Zoom meeting with me, that's my background. All right, you can go to the next slide. I'm just trying to whiz through them. Startup Nature, we're gonna watch a video about this. You can go to the next slide and I'll tell you a little bit about it. Oh, the next one is the video, so skip. We can go to the next one. So what Startup Nature is a play on the Startup Nation, right? So this is a really major new initiative. And what this is doing is saying that the Galilee is, the parts of northern Israel that were the drained swamps were these farms that have essentially failed. They're very poor kibbutzim. They have a lot of fish ponds. They were, there was fish agriculture that are abandoned. The Chinese sell fish for cheaper, and the fish pond, the fish business is not happening anymore. So you have these toxic, areas where there's just nothing there that used to be this incredible wetland area. So Dan Alone, who's our CEO, and you'll see in a video later, has came up with this idea to rewild. The rewilding movement is quite big. You can read about it in other places, in Scotland and in South America. But when I say it's big, it's like very popular. It's a hot idea because it is a nature-based solution to climate change. And it helps animals and it helps people. So that is what Startup Nature is, because it turns out that the swamps store carbon, right? We don't call them swamps anymore, we call it wetlands, and we know that it's an essential part of our planet. So we are rewilding, and that project is called Startup Nature. Next slide. This is an example of Kfar Rupin. I'm gonna show you the movie, so you're gonna see all this, so we'll skip through these. Ecotourism is a big part of Startup Nature, and so the kibbutzniks make money from the ecotourism, and we're setting up all these beautiful, what you can see here, some photos of some beautiful visitor centers there. Next slide. Another way that we care for birds is through research, and there are actually a number of research centers. The Jerusalem Bird Observatory, the one at Magan Michael that you actually just saw on the previous slide, and in Eilat, the Eilat Bird Observatory. So what you can see here is actually a Nature Israel tour. It's so funny, I see our board members, I feel like waving at them. And you can go to the Jerusalem Bird Observatory. If you go early enough in the morning, they do bird banding, or they call it bird ringing, if you ever see something about a webinar about live bird ringing. So they go early in the morning, they capture in the correct, humane way that ornithologists do the birds, and then they weigh them, they check their health, and they put a little band on them. And what happens is other ornithologists around the world are doing this, like they've in Israel grabbed birds that have a band on them from Sweden or a band on them from Tanzania. That's how people know what the bird migration flyway is, because there are bird scientists, and Israel participates in BirdLife International and is very well known for its incredible bird research. Next slide. Oh, and you can visit that Jerusalem Bird Observatory. It's right between the Knesset and the Supreme Court. It's like this hidden, beautiful urban nature gem where you would least expect it. Yeah, that's a photo of the Gazelle Valley. Next slide. So I would be remiss if I was only talking about mammals and birds, because the reality is that 50% of the wildlife and nature space of Israel is marine. So there is a big project in SPNI called the Blue Half, and we're creating marine protected areas in the Mediterranean and the Red Sea for their unique ecosystems and to save habitats and endangered species and advocate for sustainable fishery practices. We've made a lot of fishery reform, and this sea turtle is an endangered species that we're trying to protect them. If you go to the next slide, you can see a photo of the beautiful coral reef in Eilat. I can say I think I've seen more fish just snorkeling there of different types than anywhere else that I have been snorkeling in the world. And the reality is that the coral reef is very endangered by climate change, and the Israeli coral reef is extraordinarily resilient and has not succumbed to bleaching the way that so many other reefs have. And so this is another example of where they're studying especially the coral reef in Israel because of its resilience. What can we learn from this that can be replicated? So the next slide. So education. You can go to the next slide, and I'll tell you that as if the conservation and bird research and rewilding wasn't enough, in fact, SPNI provides all of the environmental education for all kids in all school systems in Israel. So that's public, private, religious, secular, Arab, Jewish, Druze, you name it. Every kid is getting environmental education from SPNI. They go on their annual trips. They stay at the field schools. This is the map, if you can see it, of the field schools. And they also get programming in their classroom. If we go back to the conversation I had at the beginning about the October 7th, you can see the field schools. Is it too small for people to see? The one at the bottom is Eilat. People were there. And then if you see the one that's by go back to the field school one, with the field schools. Can we go back to that slide? So the people were at field schools in the Negev. It's, yes, Har Negev, Hatzava, En Gedi, and all the way south in Eilat were the main areas where we were housing people. And all the field schools in the north couldn't be used. You know, nobody's been going on tiulim for the past year, right? And those field schools in the north were actually serving as barracks because when 500 or 1,000 soldiers show up to a barrack that has 100 beds, that's what happened. I'm sure you heard stories about that. There was nowhere to put anyone. It was really chaos. And so as part of the solidarity, we never get any funding for any of that. SPNI has been housing soldiers in all of the northern field schools that became military zones. So yes, next slide. So that's what I was telling you about in the school system. You can keep going. I'm trying to breeze through this. If it hadn't been for October 7th, this was going to be our big project, is teaching the kids how to not litter and to change the culture of littering in Israel the same way that environmental education happened here in America in the 70s. I was really hot for that program, and I was going to tell you all about it, but now we're just going to skip because, sorry, next slide. Environmental advocacy. So if you go to the next slide and you can see, this is a really very big part of what we're doing, and especially in the context of this current government. This current Israeli government is the least environmental or the least friendly to environmental causes of any government in Israel's history. And the thing that's interesting is SPNI, since we've been around and affecting policy and development of Israel since 1953, people sometimes think we're a government agency. We are not, but we have always had a seat at the table. And this government is not really interested in giving us a seat at the table. And if people remember the judicial reform, although my organization is very apolitical, the only politics we're interested in is environmental ones. And because birds and fish can't vote, we're out there doing the work for them. And we have to be able to sue the government and things like, what are we doing right now? We're trying to, there's an issue with a pipeline that they have already built, but that they want to pump much more oil from the Gulf of Eilat to a port in Ashdod. Now, the Ashdod port is on the Mediterranean, and none of this oil is for use in Israel. This is just to save whoever is, who's selling it to us. Remember that peace deal that Trump did with the UAE, and we were like, what's up with that? That's what's up with that. If anybody knew, they want to just do this deal to just do a shortcut instead of having to take the oil all the way around Africa through the Straits of Gibraltar into the Mediterranean. They just want to go through the Gulf of Eilat, through the pipeline, across Israel to the port on Ashdod. Just a shortcut. So we could just have totally destroy the coral reef and all of Eilat and have oil spills all over the Negev for like a few $1 million. When I told Haggai how much the money was for that deal, he was shocked. It's like so little money. It's just not worth it. So these are the kind of environmental advocacy that we're invested in. We're working very heavily right now to restore the Western Negev, to make sure that it's not developed, that they don't build an amusement park and a discotheque in the middle of this nature area. So we're working hard to protect nature in the halls of power and legislative and other kinds of environmental advocacy. Next slide. These are different kinds of programs. We have something called Sea Watch. It's too many things. I have to keep going. Let's go. Renewable energy, yes, next. Mindful tree planting. So tree planting is not a big part of our agenda. I know it's Tu B'Shvat. We're not against trees, but Israel is a natural grassland and scrubland ecosystem. It's not a place in most places for forest. It's definitely not a place for pine trees. We don't think that the desert needs to bloom with non-native species. So we're saying if you want to plant a tree for Tu B'Shvat in Israel, then we will plant a tree for you that is a native species in a place that tree is suited, that might feed some birds and some other wildlife, like fruit trees or trees in appropriate places. So if you do want to plant a tree for Tu B'Shvat, we do plant trees, but it's not really a big part of our programming. Just have to mention it because of Tu B'Shvat. Next slide. Ecotourism, so that's Gazelle Valley. Keep going. This is just to tell you that this is an interesting point. And where am I in terms of time? Okay, so what I want to tell you is that the reason that you never heard about SPNI is because it has been supported by Israelis for 71 years. They have a membership program like the Sierra Club, and people pay for ecotourism tiulim, for nature trips. And that money pays for the conservation and wildlife protection work. And also there has been government money to pay for the education system, for the school system work. So all these other organizations that you've heard of aren't getting money from Israelis. They're run by money from Americans. The organization you've never heard of is Israelis' favorite organization, and that they have been paying for themselves 90% of the budget. So we've always raised money from here, but the money we raise from here is a thin sliver of the budget. And I am going to mention that given that Israelis couldn't do tiulim, that they don't have money to pay for anything, they're not working, their businesses are failing, they've been in the army, or their husband has been in the army for the past 9 months or year or more than that, and they've never needed our help more. So now is a great time for me to be out and sharing all of this wonderful organization with all of you. It's millions of Israelis typically that go on these different hikes and tiulim with SPNI every year. Next slide. Promoting ecotourism, keep going. It's going to say, okay, there's the movie. I want to show these next. I'm going to whiz through these last slides, and then we can cut. So 70 years of impact, now at 72. These are just highlights, and I'm going to go through them really fast, but you'll get the impact. We preserved the coral reef in 1955. We preserved the Carmel forest in 1962. The protected wildflower population, you know that not picking wildflowers is one of Israelis famously don't follow any rules at all. You guys know this, right? There's only 3 rules that Israelis follow. Don't drive on Yom Kippur. Sit in your assigned seat at the movie theater, and I don't understand that one, and I can't explain it to you at all. I don't get that. And don't pick wildflowers because of this extraordinarily successful public advocacy, public campaign in the early 60s. So it just really shows you the impact of the organization. We, of course, revived the hula. That's from 1953. Next slide. Enabled the Land of Rivers project. We saved the Ashdod Dunes. Next slide. We developed the Israel National Trail, like the Appalachian Trail. You can walk across all of Israel. We developed the Gazelle Valley, and we preserved the Jerusalem forest. We stimulated fishery reform, and I think they're not on here, but I'll tell you we've introduced the rewilding to Israel through Startup Nature Project, and the helping over 100,000 Israelis through Nature Heals are just some of the highlights of what we've done. I can be done right now and just take questions. We do have a 4-minute movie that's really beautiful. If we have, are people up for the movie? I say we roll the movie. It's pretty good.
Israel is well known as the startup nation for its high tech and research, but very few know that Israel is also one of Earth's top biodiversity hotspots. How we protect and restore nature here matters around the world. My dream is for Israel to use our innovative spirit to restore nature, bringing us and the world to a much better place than where we started. This is the vision of Startup Nature. Israel lies at the junction of one of the world's largest flyways. Twice each year, hundreds of millions of birds stop here on their migration between Europe, Asia, and Africa. And every year, 400,000 people come to witness this natural wonder. Without Israel's wetlands, these birds would not have enough food and water to survive their harsh journey of thousands of miles. But as one of the smallest yet fastest growing countries in the world, our wetlands are disappearing. Now the future of these birds and the nature of 3 continents is in our hands.
For bird migration, this is one of the most important places in the world in the junction of 3 continents. The potential to develop research, tourism, education here can make us a top leader in the Middle East and in the entire world.
Israel is taking the lead, demonstrating that rewilding these places, we can not only bring birds back, but also repair our relationship with nature.
Startup Nature seizes a unique opportunity to transform unused agricultural lands into fully functioning wetland habitats, and then build them into a network of world-class wildlife sanctuaries. We'll be preserving one of the world's most important bird migration fly routes and generating millions of dollars for the local economy now and for generations to come. The first two sites, Kfar Rupin and Magan Michael, will save millions of birds a year and attract 150,000 tourists from Israel and around the world to these regions. Each site will connect people to wildlife and help us promote a greater love and understanding of nature, of the environment, and of the shared future that we have. This, to me, is one of the most visionary projects on the planet today.
This is such an amazing opportunity to bring my kids to be part of this experience where Israel is hosting millions of birds from around the world.
Startup Nature will be a major source of revenue for my business and for the other businesses in the area.
Startup Nature represents the best of what Israel is: vision, innovation, and the Jewish values of humanity and responsibility.
SPNI for 60 years been the leading policy and planning conservation organization in Israel. I was very impressed with their vision, their commitment, their efficiency, and their success. I'm committed to this project because I know it's doable and its impact will be of global significance to the preservation of nature.
Right now, Israel has a unique opportunity to show that it is possible for a nation to grow while restoring nature. Your partnership means that Israel can establish a better, more sustainable way to live together. Your contribution to Startup Nature will secure the future of the flyway and uphold our nation's responsibility to our people, our shared nature, and all of humanity.
I didn't get to tell you everything. Yes.
And it was just heartbreaking.
Yes.
So I'm glad to see that, that something is being done to address that.
Israelis love nature, and Israelis are a part of the Middle East. And the Middle East has an interesting culture where inside private space is extraordinarily clean, and outside public space, there's no culture of ownership. And in fact, people who pick up someone else's trash are called like a fryer. And there's just generally not an awareness of littering. And that's why I was saying there was a big grant from the Azrieli Foundation, and this education program was being launched in the school system, and it's still there, right? There's just so much else going on for Israel. But yes, if you ask my husband and my child, every hike we would go on picnics or hikes, like every weekend camping or something, and I would bring bags with us, and we would all spend like the first half hour, 45 minutes cleaning. That's true. And it's an interesting thing because Israelis love the nature so much, and they don't associate their littering with not loving it. But it's definitely, do you guys remember the episode of Mad Men? It stuck with me. You're nodding, you remember it too. They get up from a picnic, and she picks up the blanket, and she just shakes it out with all that fancy, newfangled plasticware is like, just shakes out onto the nature, and she folds up the blanket and puts it back. And that is to show you, I think that's where Israel is on this, right? That it's just a lack of awareness, because we were like that in America here too, until a massive campaign that many of us grew up with in the 70s, right? So it was not so different here, I think. There was a question over here, yeah.
Do you have any current lawsuits against the
Yes. Yes. So there's a number, and I couldn't even, this is not my specialty. Like, I don't know, I can't give you the list. The main one that is emphasized right now is about the pipeline that I was telling you about, because they had, we had won a victory that said no increased use, like no additional threat. There's like some legal terminology for that in the environmental world, and that was the law. And then this new government just made a deal for however many, you know, hundreds of millions more gallons to be pumped, but they're not supposed to be able to do that. And so, you know, we are suing them on that, yes. I know that there are probably some other, but not everything has to be a lawsuit also. Sometimes, like when they were trying to develop, when the developers were saying they wanted to build the amusement park on the Nova Festival Massacre site, we worked with the heads of the municipalities and other leaders in that region for them to push back. So it didn't have to come through, not everything has to come from a legal aspect. We do a lot of community organizing. Yes?
So I'm confused about trees.
Yeah.
I thought that we're supposed to plant trees in Israel, and now you're saying that.
So I don't work for the organization that told you that. And what I'm going to tell you, the nicest way that I can say this really is that we are an environmental organization, so we come from an environmental point of view. The organization that's telling you that they're planting trees for you are the same people that wanted to drain the swamps, and they're the same people that bought up land in the pre-state period and, you know, are making the desert bloom, and they are developers. There's the difference between developers and environmentalists. So I'm not saying that everything that developers do is bad. They might be building aquifers, they might be building dams that environmentalists might not like, but that might be beneficial for for human developments. But the tree planting and all that all of us grew up with is from developers. It has they're not a green organization, and they're not environmentally sound in all their practices. Although we do work with them on some things, right? Sometimes we work together and sometimes we are in opposition. Is that, I know that it's really sad. Well, what's really sad is all the forest fires from those pine trees is really sad.
Did you see the movie that was recently done about the whole thing?
No.
It's called Pine Tree. It's called Pine Tree. It's great.
Oh.
It talks about the fact that they're planting the wrong kind of trees.
So the movie that I always remember is a very old Israeli movie called Salah Shabbati. And in this movie from the 50s, there's this hilarious scene with this guy who's hired to plant trees. And so he's like planting the tree, and then they say, now stand over here and hold the sign. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Goldberg. And he stands there, and the big American car rolls up, and they get out, and they do the dog and pony show. And then that car drives away, and they're like, take the tree out, go stand over there and hold this sign, you know. And so then this other car drives up with another family. Now it's like, thank you, the Friedmans. He puts the tree in the thing. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that, first of all, a lot of trees were planted. I want to say that we have sat in picnics in JNF forests, so it's not like I haven't enjoyed their shade. So sometimes they're good, and from a purely environmentalist perspective, I mean, the other thing that I learned besides the forest fires and the soil and all this is that they change the ecology, because in a scrubland, there's certain kinds of animals that are adapted and evolved to survive and to thrive in that environment. So when you throw in a forest of pine trees, that the raptors land on there and just pick off all the small animals below. So those kind of things just totally reshape the ecology of the region. So, sorry. Yes, Yes, somebody told me that on Wednesday, or no, somebody told me that yesterday. Sorry, I've had so many speaking engagements this week. Are there more questions? I know it's late, and thank you for staying with me for the whole thing. Yes, thank you for having me.
Just before we end with Kiddush and Motzi, and then we'll go downstairs to enjoy the beautiful oneg that Denise Aronson has sponsored for us. Just want to say that when Rachel finished with our very energetic, very big 6th grade class, we all sat listening to you so beautifully. Two of the students came running up very excited saying, oh, now I know what my mitzvah project is going to be. I love nature, and this is so beautiful, and this is what I'm going to do. So we want to thank you so much for your impact on our community. And Ella and Chagai, it's so nice to have you here as well. Ella, would you just stand here and we will hold the Kiddush cup, and we'll
Join you in the blessing.
join you in the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Yeah. Oh, Manischewitz.
It is.
We tasted
it for the first time just a couple.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Can you
the
eat?
honors?
Yeah.
Shabbat
Shabbat
shalom,
shalom,
everyone.
everyone.
See you downstairs. We'll bring this challah on down also.